Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Rod McDermott, founder and CEO of Project Activate and CEO of McDermott and Bull Executive Search, one of the nation's top executive recruiting organizations with offices throughout the US, Canada, and Europe. Office Hours is a live video series where we answer your most challenging questions about landing a job, pursuing your dream job, or overall career advice. I'm your co-host, Kristen Farrenfort, and on today's topic, it is how to make an interview more conversational. Before we get started, this session is 30 minutes, so send in your questions. First come, first serve.
Kristen, thanks for the opening. I'll reiterate. We have committed to spending at least half our time answering your questions, and your questions don't necessarily have to be, excuse me, about our topic. It could be anything that you're facing as a challenge in your job search. It could be, I've been the bridesmaid twice and didn't get the nod, or I'm in an opportunity right now where they've made me an offer, but it's lower than I'm used to making. What should I do? If it's going to be 6 months out of work, I take it, but is there anything I can do? Anything that's challenging you right now, bring it forward. We'll get some good conversation going with the rest of the folks here on chat about things. So you've got kind of a group think. You get my opinion. You might not agree with it, but you get to hear it at least. You'll get Kristen's opinion. Yeah. And then, but you might even get some opinions from some other folks. So feel free to just dial them out in the chat as we start talking about our topic. And we want to make sure we answer your questions and what's really hot on your minds.
Well, let's get to it. The topic is how to make an interview more conversational. And I imagine throughout your whole career, you've had interviews that come in and you're like, wow, are we friends? Are we, wait, are we friends? Do we know each other? How do you get there? I imagine, going into an interview I have, and a lot of people have this like nervous, it's very nerve wracking to get in there. How do you make it conversational? How do you make it comfortable?
It's funny, Kristen. So, and I've had a bunch of interviews that go that way, and I've had a bunch that go a different way too. The number one thing is preparation, right? So the people that prepare, the people that do their background homework on me when they come in an interview with me, and almost always can we find some connection point, right? We'll have somebody in common that we know. We might have a company in common that we work for, and we might know some people in common. So if you walk into that interview knowing a lot about the person that you're meeting with, right? You don't even have to share with them, oh, I did all this background research on you and don't say that, right? You don't have to share that, but it's basic stuff, right? When you walk in to interview with a company, you should know everything you can about the company. You should not just look at their website. You should look at what people are talking about the company, what their press releases are, what their earnings are, if they're public, what analysts are saying, what industry analysts are saying about the industry itself. And then you ought to know the same about the person that you're interviewing, or I should say people that you're interviewing with. And this is not all that hard to do. It's interesting. Sometimes people say, hey, I don't know exactly who I'm going to be interviewing with sometimes until I show up. Yeah. They might schedule a panel interview. Well, good candidates, and you guys have all probably been doing this over the last year or two, are finding out, hey, I'd like to know who I'm meeting with. I just like to kind of get a little bit of information on their background. The company never says no to that. The company never says, well, I can't tell you, or I don't know yet. Or sometimes they might say, I don't know. Well, can you let me know at least a day in advance, because I want to walk in there knowing a little bit about their background so that we can have a really substantive conversation. So I think it's important to do that level of research. And I've had people come in and do enough research on me and they say, hey, I found that you give to certain political candidates. In fact, I saw that you gave some money to so-and-so. And oh, yeah, they became a friend of mine, blah, blah, blah. They're actually a friend of mine. We went to school together, or we used to work together. And were you at that event that they hosted at so-and-so's house? And you get these sidebar conversations. And now you've got these connection points with that person. So I think it's really cool to do that. It's harder to do in COVID, but back before COVID, when you would walk into somebody's office for an interview, assuming they do have offices, some of the spaces, some of the companies don't have an office environment. And so you're meeting people in conference rooms, so you can't really do this. But, one sheet is you look at what's on their wall or their bookshelf and you see pictures. and you can see things that give them pleasure, right? We put pictures up in our office that remind us of our family, that give us pleasure, great trips we had, things like that. So you can actually, I've done this before. I'll walk into a CEO's office and I'll say, is that the Amalfi Coast? Yeah, yeah. Oh, what town? Is that Positano? Yeah. Oh, we had the best time there. And you start talking about that stuff. And then all of a sudden you've got this connection. So don't make the whole interview. Don't go too far down that road because they'll get a little frustrated because they want to get to know you. But it is a way to create those connections.
Yeah, and it's easy to go down a rabbit hole of getting off topic of the actual job.
Yeah.
We have some questions coming in. I'm going to start with this anonymous question, and then Robin, I'm going to get to yours. But question came in that said, I am transitioning with extensive diverse skills, and I'm doing everything from networking, info interview, to direct applying to open roles. I have had many mock interviews with great positive feedback, yet the networking is very slow process as a relationship needs nurturing. Agree. Plus, direct apply only generates thank yous, but no thank you emails. Please provide some tips on how to move forward.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying when you say direct applying is it says to open roles. So one of the things that I try to spell out or profess is I think you should go after the companies and the roles that you can provide the most value to, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be an open role, right? A lot of companies, especially now, I mean, I don't know if you've been reading the job reports lately, but hiring last month was way lower than expected. But I know the federal government's trying to figure out why, right? They're trying to figure out where that's coming from. And some of it could be lower level jobs. It could be more hourly. It could be jobs in hospitality. And I'm hearing, this is a little political slant, so I don't want it to become political here, but that, with the unemployment benefits where they're at, people are just choosing not to go back to work because they'd rather, take a long extended vacation and collect unemployment for a little bit longer. So that might be part of the problem. But I will share with you this: in the corporate world and at the corporate level, things are busier than they've been maybe forever. I mean, every single firm I talked to, I got off the phone this morning. I did a video with a guy who retired from Spencer Stewart and Korn Ferry, and he's now consulting and coaching to other search firms. He goes, in North America, not just the US, but Canada as well. He said, they're on fire. Things are so crazy. I've never seen. He's been in the business for almost 40 years. And so, that's what's going on in the marketplace right now. And companies are hiring. They're doing it in a way, sometimes they don't even put the roles out there yet. And they're starting to look through their network. So my advice is, number one, make your target list of companies, right? If you can identify 30, 40, 50, 100 companies that you could work for and 100 roles within those companies and the hiring managers, you probably won't get to all 100. If you reach out to every single one of those companies, you'll probably get to between 30 and 60 before you do it and before you get there. And the number one thing, I wish I could address you by name. The number one thing is figure out what solution you can bring to their company, right? Companies want to hire people to solve problems. They don't want to just add employees. They have problems that they need solving, and they say, let's go get this person. So figure out what you could do for them. And when you present yourself as a solution to a challenge, a solution to a problem they're having, they're more likely to look at you to solve that problem, right? This is exactly what consultants do. They do research on companies and say, hey, I've recognized that your industry is being challenged in this one area. These are my skill sets. I don't know how your company is addressing this challenge, but here's what other companies are doing. I'd like to talk to you about how someone with my background can help you address this challenge. And I have some very unique and interesting thoughts on it for your industry. Would you like to hear them? And then they're talking to you kind of like a consultant, as opposed to, hey, I'm looking for my next job, and I'm wondering if somebody like me could work for you guys. Find a problem that you can solve.
Good. It's a good pivot to our next question in terms of consulting. Robin asked, this is off topic for the interview topic, but if there is time today, I have decided to take my career skill set and go out on my own. Any advice for my journey creating a consulting-based business?
Yeah. First of all, Robin, congratulations. It's really, really cool to do. I've been, on my own. We've had our firm for 20 years. I'm not technically on my own because I get to work with about 60 great people, but it is a lot of fun. It is challenging. What I would say, if you're doing it as a one person operation, you're trying to balance, selling your skills and experience as a consultant with actually the time to sell, right? And then up front, you don't have any business, so you're 100% sales. And then once you actually get business, then you don't have time to do sales. And so every consultant I've ever talked to says I'm always somewhere between 30 and 90 days away from not having any business, because I'm busy, 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 but I don't have time to sell. And then I don't have any business and I have all the time in the world. So what I would advise you to do is create a sales plan that allows you to focus on what needs to be focused on, but doesn't take your focus off of sales 100%. For instance, and I say this to search consultants who come into our business, they build a practice. I say 20% of your time should always be spent, I call it kissing frogs, right? Building relationships, meeting people meeting people that you're going to want to do business with at some point, right? Always have at least 20% of your time for that. If you're not doing that, you're not keeping your foot on the gas of business development. And there will be a time that you will fill all these searches and you will do a great job. And your clients will say, this was awesome. Can't wait to use you again. Don't have anything for you now, but let's stay in touch for the next 3-6 months. And I'm sure we'll have something. My biggest clients, they've always, everything is cyclical, right? And they hire in cycles. And you can go times without having a piece of business. I have one client, we're just picking up a search this week. We haven't done a search with him in about 4 months. There was a time probably a year ago, we had like 12, 13 searches going with them. And so you can be really, really busy with one client and then fill a lot of that, and then things change. So as a consultant, that's one piece of advice. The second one is figure out what you're best in the world at, right? What are you so darn good at? And by the way, this is the same for job seekers too. When you're thinking about what problem can I solve, what are you really, really good at? What are you better at than a lot of folks, right? And get really clear on that and be really good at presenting that to CEOs of companies. And that's the other thing I was going to say. Even if you wouldn't be reporting to a CEO, if you're talking to smaller companies, you're talking to massive companies like $10 billion companies, you're not going to get to the CEO. Go to the hiring manager, or at least the division president if you can. But if you're talking to smaller companies, sub $1 billion, go to the CEO and share with them, because they're the one who's up at night thinking, how are we going to solve this problem? And tell them what you're good at. Give them your track record. And then also tell them what you're not good at. You can, because a lot of people try to be good at everything. And then what they do is they kind of mess up their message, right? What they end up doing is they say, listen, I'm great. If your company needs to restructure, I'm really good at restructuring. I've done a bunch of restructuring. If your company's done restructuring and you're ready to go and you want to, grow sales, I'm also great at that. Well, most people aren't great at both. Yeah. And I have an old friend of mine that's run multi-billion-dollar companies. And I would tell him, I said, you always get hired when they need to grow sales. And you do a phenomenal job. He literally is a guy who can double sales in 3 years at companies. And these are multi-billion-dollar companies. But when it comes time to, shrink and shut down plants and shut down offices and restructure and reorganize and outsource and do stuff like that, he's not great at that. This is a lead from the front sales and marketing CEO who can put you on the map. In fact, he told me once, he goes, in technology, I can take almost any product from a concept to design, production, manufacturing, shipment in boxes on retail shelves in 90 days. And I've done it a bunch of times for some big companies. I said, that's your calling card. That's what you do. And I said, by the way, one thing I know about you, you always get fired when the company needs to restructure. The board never picks you to be that guy. Why don't you just admit it up front? That's not the problem you solve. If you're looking for somebody to restructure, I'm not that guy. I'm a growth guy. I will double your business in 3 years. If you're ready for that, sign me up and let's go do it. And then I also told him, you have jobs for 3 years, but you're out of work for a year. So make sure you save a little bit of that comp every year to cover that 1 year you're out of work. Everybody thinks the next job they have, they'll work at for the rest of their career. It almost never happens.
No. Nowadays it doesn't. We talked about this earlier, but in generations like our parents, they were there from the beginning and they were there till the end. They got in at 22 and they retired at 60. At these big corporations, not anymore. Doesn't happen anymore. And you're the first to kind of see that as well, with those that are in transition.
Yeah.
But getting back to the question, when we're talking about making an interview more conversational, are there specific questions that someone should be asking in the interview to make it conversational?
Yeah. So great question and great segue, Kristen, because I also think that there's an art to you conducting the interview, right? And you've all heard this before, right? You want to control the interview, the kind of pace, the direction, where it's going, because then you can control the outcome a little bit better, right? If everything's being fired at you and you're responding, you're not really in control. But you want to do it subtly. You want to do it in a way where they don't actually see it happening, right? So
Right.
you come in prepared with some questions. And so when they ask you a question, let's say, hey, I want to tell me about a time that you've had to like come into a team. Let's say it's a team of 5 or 8 people. Maybe your total team size is, 50 or 100 people, but your direct reports are 5 or 8. And you realize that some of them aren't up to the task that you've got to, move forward with in the company. So you just landed the job, you're running this group, and some of those folks, maybe it's 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is, aren't up to the task. How do you manage that process? What are the things that you've done in the past to manage it, right? So somebody might ask you that question. I ask that question. If I have a client who is telling me, listen, I need a new leader for this team, one of the things I ask that client when we're kicking off the search, how are the direct reports? And if they say, oh, they're all stellar, they're great, okay, that's good. If they say, it's weak, it's weak. That's one of the reasons why we have this opening is their leader was weak and surrounded him or herself by some weak folks. Now, a couple of them are really good, but I think we're going to need to have some changes. So I hear that, right? So I might ask that question when I'm interviewing a candidate for that role. Tell me about a time, blah, blah, blah. So one of the things you do, figure out your story, right? So you tell them about the situation. You tell them about the tactics that you used, right? The plan that you put in place, and then how you executed against that, and then the results. So it might be as simple as, and I'll do this in like 30 seconds. Yeah, I walked into this company, you see on my resume 4 years ago, I worked for this company. When I walked in, I had exactly that. I had 8 direct reports. They were all great people, by the way, really good people, but 3 of the 8 weren't up to the next task. I gave everybody 60 days. I really wanted to evaluate. Most important, I walked in kind of knowing. My boss told me which 3, and I kind of knew which 3 pretty quickly, but I wanted the other 5 to know that I was going to give those 3 a fair shake. So I gave everybody a fair shake, and I said, here's where we're going. And then when it came time to do, the departure, I treated them fairly, and I let everybody know what we were doing. And I made sure that they had a great exit, because it was important to me, for the people that are still at the company, that they see that, hey, we treat people like people, and we treat them fairly, and we want them to land on their feet. And I'm going to give them good references. And so here's how I went through that evaluation process in that first, 60 days. By the way, and so I might tell them that, right? And then at the end of it, I'll say, hey, I got a question for you. That was a great question. I hope I answered it well. Why do you ask? Like, is there something going on at the company? And then they'll get me talking. I'll say, well, you kind of hit the nail on the head. There's a few folks in this group that probably aren't long for it, and maybe won't survive the change, according to your future boss, if you're the guy or gal to get this job. So that's why I brought it up. And so if they bring it up in the interview, you can ask that question. So you don't ask the question first, you answer the question first, because it does get a little frustrating as an interviewer asking somebody a question, and if they say, oh, that's interesting, why do you ask, without answering the question. Answer the question first, and then say, hey, I'd love to know, is that a challenge right now? Is that something going on there? And then get them talking, and then say, so let me ask you a question. What do you see as the lift if we make those 3 changes? Those are core jobs, core roles. What do you see as the lift for this team? Gosh, I think we could do so much more. Here's what my goals are. Then you get them talking to you, right? And now all of a sudden, a great interview is one where the interviewer talks a lot and shares with you the whole story as if you're already in the job. That's what you want. You want this interview. You want them to feel like, God, I can see Kristen being a solution to my problem. I can see her being in this role and taking what we need to get done, getting it done, and moving us up and to the right.
I'll go.
No, I was going to say that's what I want, because then it's a good interview for me. And again, I shared this, I don't know, sometime in the last couple of weeks on one of these office hours. We both want the same thing out of an interview, right? If I'm the hiring manager and I'm interviewing you, you want to do well. and you want to maybe have an opportunity that's a cool opportunity for you, and maybe even get offered the job. And I also want you to do well. And I also want to see you as a solution to my problem. So we both have the same outcome in mind. Let's just try to get there. And the best way to do it is let's talk about everything. What's going on at the company? How can I help?
Yeah, and asking questions is solving problem. You're actually solving problems while you're asking these questions. And
Yeah.
you become someone that they're like, well, we actually, to your point from last office hours, we need this person. Now we need this person.
Yep.
When we talk about here, I have a question that came in. Um, you know, what happens? And you said early on, you said, I've had interviews that go great, and I've had interviews that not go great. What if you're not vibing with the person who's interviewing you?
Yeah, that's really
How do you
hard.
pivot?
That's really, really hard. So you've got to figure something out about them. And so if you can, if you can kind of stop the interview, not in its tracks, you don't want to do it in a way that's so obvious and overt that it feels really uncomfortable. But you might want to say, hey, I got a quick question for you. Um, Tell me what keeps you up at night about this role, about this position. And kind of a follow on to that too is, if you're not kept up at night and this thing is going really, really great, what do you think is the potential outcome here? Like, what do you think this division could achieve, or this department could achieve with the right leadership in there? I want to know what your real vision is, and get them talking. The more they're talking, the more you're going to be able to kind of gauge their vibe. There are certain people. I always say this about Chris Bull, my business partner. He can play on both ends of the spectrum. He can play with the engineer, product development person who's really, really, excited about their widget that they created, and gets into the technology and the nuts and bolts, all the way to, the backslapping, cigar smoking, golfing CEO over here, who doesn't get into all this stuff, but really, is focused on growing the business, and that's, working with the board and all that stuff. He can play all angles, and that's an art. It's a real art. Most people are very comfortable in a space that's, a little bit here and a little bit over here, but outside of those margins, they're not all that comfortable. The more comfortable you can be, and the more you can connect with people outside of those margins, the better candidate you're going to be for a company. Because let's face it, if we're doing interviews at a company, we're probably going to interview with 5 people, right? If we interview with 5 people, some companies have a philosophy that we want to have everybody say thumbs up. Some companies have a philosophy that we just want to have the majority say thumbs up. We don't know. We don't know in advance. And then if it's just the majority, which ones are the stronger influencers or the decision makers? Clearly, who you're going to report to is the most important of all of them. But that person might defer some of the decision making to people that would report to you. I have a lot of companies that say it's important for our company culture that the team that's here today that we like and support likes their potential boss. And I've had a lot of, executives come at me and say, well, that makes no sense. They're going to be reporting to me. That's kind of old school thinking. It doesn't work that way anymore. Companies are very focused. I don't know if you saw that Pinterest thing today, Kristen.
No, what was it?
So there was, apparently a couple people were left Pinterest about a year ago. And they felt like there was a culture of discrimination and some other things. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but they were forced to sign NDAs. And there's a new state law that's potentially going into effect. I think it's been passed by the state Senate. Now it's got to go through the rest of the legislature and ultimately the governor, to basically say these NDAs are not legal anymore. You can't prevent somebody from talking about their experience at a company. And so, it becomes embarrassing for companies, right? So what they're wanting to do to become really good employers, and what I call employers of choice, is they're trying to be really open, and they're trying to give everybody a voice. And they're moving away from this command and control type structure where, which is how companies were run historically up until probably the 2000s, into more of an inclusive organization.
Right.
And by doing that, they're going to listen to the folks that might be reporting to you. So you've got to engage with them too.
Right. Well, it's interesting too. I think I've been on really successful teams, and everything starts from the top. Everything, it starts from the top, and everyone else will really kind of follow suit. But we have a question coming in that says, considering an offer for a role that is a step back in title and in comp, and while getting started to get increased interest, how would you weigh this decision process?
Okay, so I'm gonna be quick on this because I know we've only got a few more minutes, but I always look at three things in a potential opportunity. Number one, is it the right company? Is this a cool company that I can get excited about? Their vision, their values, their culture, where they're trying to go, the industry, all that. If it's a really cool company that I can say, I want to work for them, okay? Then secondly, is it the right job, right? Number one is a company. Number two is it the right job, right? The right title, the all that. And then third, is it the right comp, right? And I look at comp last only because number one and two, if they're right, I'll figure out the comp. And usually the comp will figure itself out in the first 1 to 2 years, maybe not right away, but maybe a year in or maybe 2 years in, that comp will figure itself out. But more importantly, I want to love what I do. I mean, I could be making $1 million a year for a company I hate, doing a job I don't like, and my life sucks. Or I could be making $250 a year for a really cool company in a cool industry, and I'm feeling good. Maybe I'm getting some stock options, and I am loving life, right? That to me is more important. So taking a step back in title and comp, if it's the right company, is really cool. Sometimes if it's a job that you need, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're the VP of finance and you've been the VP of finance for two private companies, don't have any public experience, right? And you need public experience. So maybe it's a director of finance, but it's reporting to the CFO. So you really have that same reporting structure that you've had, but now it's a public company and they're going to give you all these things that you need in your background. You need to check those boxes. Sometimes you do it. I used to do a lot of work for Gateway Computer. They had what we call title deflation. I would take a VP from Intel and make him or her a director at Gateway. It was so hard to recruit for those guys, but we would talk them into it because it was the right role for them. And Gateway was transforming, and it was actually kind of cool, some of the stuff they were doing.
Yeah, and what's so interesting too is, when you talk about title and comp, it's something that also gets, like you said, negotiated, and it becomes something that can be negotiated.
Yeah, go through the process, right? Get them to fall in love with you, get them to get the offer stage, and then say, hey, I love this and I want to do it. I'm missing on a couple of things. Can you guys help me on this? And do it in a way that you're trying to solve the problem, not hold them up. Say, listen, I really, really want to take this. I'm stuck on these two things. And I'm not saying I'm stuck in quicksand or concrete and I'm not going to be able to move, because I want to move. I definitely want to move. I want to do this thing. But can you help me?
Yeah, can you help me? And a lot of our executive network members actually come into the network knowing, hey, I'm unhappy. I know I want to make a change. I want to pivot. Where do I start? Yep. So identifying if you're happy, if you're unhappy, also something that we talk about a lot in Project Activate. A lot of our members in Project Activate that come on board, they're really trying to figure out what they really want in life. And
yeah, what's going to make your heart sing? What's going to make you feel like it's not working? If you're doing that, man, it's awesome. It's really cool. Okay, I think we're
just at time.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Kristen, I know you have a sign off, but I just want to thank everybody for joining us. Sorry about the heavy stuff early in the call, but it's great being here with you all every Monday, and we'll be here again next Monday.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining. To next week, please join us on the topic, how to discuss gaps in your resume. But thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Have a great week. Feel free to send us your questions in advance. And if you have any specific questions that I can answer this week, feel free to shoot to me either on LinkedIn or an email, and I'm happy to get to them.
Awesome.
Thanks,
wonderful.
Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.